Captain Ju Park took a deep breath as she stared through the massive viewport of the HSS Nemesis. Behind her, the bridge crew worked with focused precision, their movements betraying the tension everyone felt. The red planet Mars and its orbital shipyards were shrinking rapidly as the Nemesis pulled away, the final maintenance shuttles returning to the docks. "Status report," Ju said, her voice steady despite the weight on her shoulders. Commander Do-Yun Lee, her second-in-command for the past 6 years, glanced up from his station. His usually cheerful face was now marked with the same grim determination that had become the standard expression throughout the human fleet. "Engineering reports the quantum displacement drive is fully charged. Weapon systems are online, and the Prometheus array is in standby mode. All crew members are at their stations. We're ready, Captain." Ju nodded, her hand unconsciously touching the small holo pendant at her neck, a picture of her family back on Earth. 15 years of war with the Arvex Collective had taken its toll on everyone. Humanity had started with such confidence, such certainty in their technological edge. But the Arvex adapted quickly, their hive-mind approach to warfare allowing them to implement changes across their entire fleet simultaneously. Now, 15 years later, humanity had lost 23 colony worlds. Over 2 billion dead. The remaining human-controlled systems were frantically building defenses, but they were losing ground every month. The Nemesis was different. Built in secret over 5 years, incorporating technologies that even most of the Admiralty didn't know existed, it represented everything humanity had learned about the Arvex and their weaknesses. "Lieutenant Hanna, bring up the latest intelligence from Arcturus," Ju ordered. The tactical officer's fingers danced across her console, and a 3-dimensional star map materialized in the center of the bridge. The Arcturus system glowed red, with 3 planets highlighted: New Terra, Demeter, and Horizon. All human colony worlds, all under attack. "The Arvex fleet arrived 6 days ago," Hanna explained. Admiral Kang's defensive force engaged immediately, but was overpowered. The Arvex have established orbital superiority around all 3 worlds. Ground forces have landed on New Terra and Demeter. Horizon's orbital defenses are still holding, but not for long. Ju studied the hologram, noting the positions of the Arvex ships. Unlike their usual scattered formation, they were concentrated around New Terra, the most populous of the colonies with over 20 million inhabitants. "They're learning," she murmured. "They know which targets hurt us most." "Captain," called Communications Officer Jae-hyun from his station. "Priority message from Fleet Admiral Soman." Ju straightened her uniform jacket. "Put her through." The star map disappeared, replaced by the stern face of Fleet Admiral Soman Kang, the most decorated officer in the United Earth Defense Force. Despite being in her 70s, her eyes were sharp, her expression unyielding. "Captain Park," she said without preamble, "the Arvex have brought their largest battle group yet to Arcturus. We've lost contact with Admiral Kang's flagship. I've authorized the Prometheus Protocol." A chill ran through the bridge. The Prometheus Protocol was last resort authorization. Full weapons release with no restrictions. "Understood, Admiral," Ju replied. "We're prepared to jump. The Nemesis is untested in combat, Captain. But our simulations show it has the capability to turn this war around. You must succeed. 20 million civilians are counting on you." The Admiral paused, then added more softly, "My daughter and her family are on New Terra. Bring them home, Ju." "We will, Admiral. I promise." As the transmission ended, Ju turned to face her crew. 40 of the best officers and enlisted personnel in the fleet, each selected personally by her or Do-Yun, each aware of the historic nature of their mission. "You've all been briefed on the capabilities of this ship," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the bridge. "The Nemesis is unlike anything humanity has built before. The quantum displacement drive doesn't just move us through space. It removes us from one point and places us in another instantaneously. Our adaptive shields can analyze enemy weapons and reconfigure in milliseconds, and the Prometheus Array. She paused, letting the name sink in. Everyone knew what it could do, at least in theory. The Prometheus Array can channel the energy of a star itself into a focused weapon. It has never been tested in actual combat. Today, that changes. Juwu moved to the center of the bridge, standing beside the now empty hologram projector. In 15 years of war, we've never managed to surprise the Arvex. Their hive mind lets them adapt to our tactics almost immediately. But they don't know about this ship. They don't know what's coming. She looked at each of her senior officers in turn. Do-Yun, her steady XO. Hana, the tactical genius. Jae-Yun, whose ears had saved an entire colony world by intercepting Arvex communications. Minju, the chief engineer who had helped design the Prometheus Array. And Sunwoo, the pilot whose simulator scores were the highest in fleet history. The people of Arcturus have been fighting for 6 days. They're tired. They're afraid. But they're still holding on because they believe help is coming. Juwu squared her shoulders. We are that help. Today, we change the course of this war. A chorus of "Yes, Captain" echoed across the bridge. Juwu returned to her command chair. Lieutenant Sunwoo, set coordinates for the outer edge of the Arcturus system. Position Alpha. We'll assess the situation before engaging. Coordinates set, Captain. Engineering, status of the quantum drive. Minju's voice came through the comm system. Drive is at full power, Captain. Displacement matrix is stable. Juwu settled into her chair, feeling the subtle vibration as the Nemesis's systems powered up to levels never before achieved on a human vessel. Attention all hands, she announced shipwide. Prepare for quantum displacement. Secure all stations. The lights dimmed slightly as power was diverted to the drive. On the main view screen, the stars seemed to elongate, though this was merely a visual effect of the displacement field forming around the ship. Do-Yun moved to stand beside Juwu's chair. 15 years, he said quietly. My brother died in the first year of the war. He never got to see us fight back effectively. Juwu nodded. Everyone on board had lost someone. After today, the Arvex will learn what it means when humanity is pushed too far. Quantum displacement drive ready, Captain, Sunwoo reported. Awaiting your command. Juwu took one last look at the receding image of Mars. The next time they saw the solar system, they would either be heroes or dead. Let's show the Arvex what happens when they corner humanity, she said, her voice firm with resolve. Initiate quantum displacement. Sunwoo's hand moved across his console. For a brief moment, reality seemed to blur. There was no sensation of movement, no acceleration, just a momentary feeling of existence and non-existence happening simultaneously. Then the view screen cleared. Where Mars had been seconds before, now the distant light of Arcturus shone. They had traveled over 36 light-years in an instant, and in the distance, barely visible but unmistakable, the flashes of weapons fire lit up the blackness of space like a distant thunderstorm. The battle for Arcturus was still raging, and humanity's deadliest warship had just arrived. The quantum ripples faded as the HSS Nemesis materialized at the edge of the Arcturus system. The bridge crew remained silent as the main view screen adjusted to show the scene before them. Around the blue-green world of New Terra, dozens of Arvex vessels swarmed like angry insects. Their distinctive crescent-shaped warships and hexagonal carriers formed a deadly web around the human colony. Lieutenant Commander Taeyong Kim's fingers tightened on the edge of his tactical station. They'd brought half their fleet, he whispered, the color draining from his face as the sensor data streamed in. I count 37 primary warships, at least 60 support vessels. And something new. Captain Juwu leaned forward in her command chair. Magnify Sector 4. The screen zoomed in on a cluster of smaller objects being deployed from the largest Arvex vessel, a massive dreadnought nearly 3 kilometers long. Unlike the organic curves of typical Arvex ships, these were angular, geometric constructions. Begin passive scans of their flagship, Juwu ordered. Full spectrum analysis. Let's see what we're dealing with before we announce ourselves. The Nemesis hung motionless in space, its advanced stealth systems making it virtually invisible to Arvex sensors. The ship's quantum displacement had left them in the shadow of Arcturus Ivy's largest moon, providing additional cover. Passage scans complete, reported Science Officer Minsu after several tense minutes. He looked up from his console with a mixture of concern and fascination. Captain, they've modified their shield harmonics. It appears to be a completely new type of energy shield, one designed specifically to counter our phase cannons. They've been adapting, Commander Do-Yun observed grimly. Every engagement teaches them more about our weapons. Chu-Wu nodded. Minsu, feed the shield data to the ship's eye. Let's see if it can find a weakness. The bridge fell silent as the Nemesis advanced artificial intelligence, a quantum neural network far beyond anything previously deployed on a human vessel, processed the information. After barely 30 seconds, a series of equations and diagrams appeared on the main screen. The AI has identified a fluctuation pattern in their shield matrix, Minsu reported, studying the data. There's a 1.3-second vulnerability during their power cycling sequence. If we time our weapons fire precisely, we can punch through. Ju finished. Good work. Lieutenant Hana called from her station. Captain, I'm detecting communications between the Arvex fleet and their ground forces. They've established beachheads in 3 major cities on Nuterra. Taeyong's analysis came next, his voice tense. Captain, those new objects they're deploying. They're bombardment platforms. Based on their positioning, they're setting up for a synchronized orbital strike against population centers. He triggered a simulation on the tactical display. Red circles spread across the surface of Nuterra, each representing millions of casualties. Destruction pattern analysis suggests they're not targeting military installations, Taeyong continued. These are designed to maximize civilian casualties. If they activate those platforms, we're looking at deaths in the millions, perhaps the entire colony. A cold silence fell over the bridge. Everyone knew what this meant. The Arvex weren't just fighting for territory anymore. This was a deliberate attempt at genocide. Juwoo's jaw tightened. She stood from her chair, her decision made. Battle stations, she ordered, her voice sharp and clear. Tactical alert. Bring all weapons online and prepare the primary cannons. The lighting on the bridge shifted to a dim red as alert klaxons sounded throughout the ship. Crew members who had been monitoring their stations now moved with renewed purpose, bringing the Nemesis's formidable arsenal to full readiness. Engineering reports all weapon systems at full power, Do-Hyun announced. The Prometheus array is charged and standing by. Ju-Woo turned to her pilot. Lieutenant Sunwoo, plot an intercept course. I want us directly behind their rear guard, between those 3 destroyer-class vessels. Course plotted, Captain. Commander Do-Hyun, prepare firing solutions for all primary weapon systems. Target the bombardment platforms first, then the support ships. Targeting solutions ready, Captain. Do-Hyun confirmed seconds later. Forward phase cannons locked on the bombardment platforms. Quantum torpedoes primed for the destroyers. Ju-Woo took a moment to survey her crew. Each face showed tension but also determination. They had trained for this moment for months. Every simulation, every drill had prepared them for this first engagement. Minsu, what's the status of the colony's defenses? Orbital defense platforms are at 30% capability. Ground-based defense systems are still operational in the southern continent, but the northern hemisphere is largely undefended. Civilian shelters are at capacity. 20 million souls counting on them. Admiral Soman's family among them. Hana, are there any communications from Admiral Kang's fleet? The communications officer shook her head. Nothing, Captain. Their last transmission was 6 hours ago, reporting heavy casualties and a strategic withdrawal to regroup. Ju-Woo nodded grimly. The Nemesis was on its own. Tactical assessment of our chances, Commander Taeyong. The tactical officer straightened. If we can strike before they detect us, We can eliminate approximately 40% of their force in the initial volley. The Prometheus array should disable their flagship. After that, he hesitated. It will depend on how quickly they adapt. Then we'll have to move faster than they can think, Ju said firmly. She returned to her command chair, strapping herself in. Sunwoo, on my mark, disengage stealth systems and execute the intercept at maximum thrust. Ready, Captain. Ju took one deep breath, centering herself. For 15 years of war, humanity had been on the defensive, always retreating, always losing ground. Today, that changed. All hands, prepare for combat maneuvers, she announced ship-wide. This is what we've trained for. Today we hit back. The bridge crew tensed, ready for her command. Execute intercept. To cloak on arrival. The Nemesis surged forward, its engines pushing it to speeds that would have torn apart any other human vessel. In seconds, it crossed the vast distance, appearing directly behind the Arvex rearguard. The stealth field dropped, and for the first time, the Arvex became aware of the human warship in their midst. On the view screen, Ju could see the 3 Arvex destroyers, their sleek, biomechanical forms hanging in space. For one frozen moment, they remained motionless, their sensors not yet registering the threat that had materialized among them. It was the perfect moment, the element of surprise that humanity had not enjoyed since the earliest days of the war. Fire everything, Ju commanded. The Nemesis erupted with devastating force. Phase cannons lashed out in precisely timed bursts, targeting the shield fluctuations the AI had identified. Quantum torpedoes streaked toward the destroyers, while secondary weapon systems targeted the bombardment platforms. The first destroyer's shields collapsed under the onslaught, its hull buckling as multiple torpedoes detonated against it. The second managed to begin turning, its weapon systems powering up. But too late. The Nemesis' fire tore through its midsection, triggering a cascade of explosions that ripped the vessel apart. The third destroyer began to return fire, energy beams lancing out toward the human warship. But the Nemesis' adaptive shields flared, absorbing the impact without strain. Shields holding at 98%, reported Doyun. Their weapons are ineffective against our defenses. Bombardment platforms. Ju demanded. 11 destroyed, 7 damaged, Taeyong replied. The remaining platforms are being moved behind the Arvex flagship for protection. On the view screen, the Arvex fleet was coming alive, ships breaking formation and turning toward this unexpected threat. Their hive mind communication was already coordinating a response. But they were too late. The Nemesis had drawn first blood, and the battle for Arcturus had truly begun. The Nemesis moved through space like a predator finally unchained. Its hull gleamed under the distant light of Arcturus as it twisted and turned between enemy vessels, weapons blazing with precision that the Arvex had never encountered before. Phase cannons cut through the weaker support ships while quantum torpedoes detonated against the hulls of larger vessels, creating blooms of fire that quickly died in the vacuum of space. Evasive pattern Delta, Captain Ju ordered as 3 Arvex cruisers attempted to surround them. Roll ship to bring dorsal batteries to bear. Lieutenant Sunwoo's hands flew across his console, and the massive warship responded with the agility of a vessel half its size. The Nemesis rolled sharply, presenting its most heavily armed section toward the approaching cruisers. Firing solution locked, called out Commander Doyun. Executing. A barrage of concentrated energy beams lashed out, striking the lead cruiser at precisely the moment its shields cycled. The beams punched through the unprotected hull, causing catastrophic damage to its power core. The cruiser erupted in a silent explosion, debris flying outward and damaging the 2 flanking vessels. Direct hit, Doyun reported, allowing himself a small smile. Their shield harmonics match our AI's predictions exactly. The bridge crew worked with focused intensity, their months of training evident in every movement. For the first time in this long war, humanity had the technological edge, and they were using it to devastating effect. 3 dreadnoughts disabled, Captain," reported Taeyong, his voice steady despite the chaos displayed on his tactical screens. "2 more heavily damaged. Our targeting algorithms are predicting their evasive maneuvers before they execute them." On the main view screen, the battle unfolded like a deadly dance. The ARVEX ships, initially scattered by the surprise attack, were now attempting to regroup. Their formation was changing, adapting to the unexpected threat in their midst. "They're learning," Zhu observed. "How long until they adapt their shields to our weapons?" "The AI estimates 7 minutes before they can implement a system-wide adjustment," Minsu replied from the science station. Zhu nodded. "Then we need to press our advantage now. Sunwoo, bring us closer to their flagship." The pilot's hands danced across his console. "Course plotted, Captain. The flagship is surrounded by 4 heavy cruisers. Can we punch through their defensive screen?" Taeyong studied his tactical display. "Yes, Captain, but it would leave our ventral section exposed for approximately 12 seconds. The risk is acceptable. Execute." The Nemesis surged forward, its engines pushing to maximum power. Energy beams and plasma bolts from the ARVEX fleet converged on the human warship, most dissipating harmlessly against its adaptive shields. The few that made it through caused minimal damage to the outer hull. "Shields holding at 83%, reported Doyun. "Hull integrity at 97%. The Nemesis sliced through the defensive formation, its weapons tearing apart 2 of the cruisers as it passed. The others turned to pursue, but they were too slow. "We're in position, Captain," Sunwoo announced. 2,000 kilometers from the ARVEX flagship. From this distance, the massive ARVEX command vessel dominated the view screen. Unlike the crescent shapes of their smaller ships, the flagship resembled a giant hexagonal disk, nearly 3 kilometers across. Its surface bristled with weapon emplacements and what appeared to be biological sensor nodes. The surviving bombardment platforms were being pulled back toward the flagship's protective envelope. The ARVEX were clearly prioritizing these genocide weapons over offensive operations. Zhu stood from her command chair, her face set with determination. "Prepare the Prometheus array," she said. A hushed tension fell over the bridge. The Prometheus array was the most powerful weapon ever created by human hands, a system that could harness the energy of a star itself and focus it into a devastating beam. It had never been used in actual combat before. "Beginning power-up sequence," Minju reported from engineering. "Initializing stellar tap." The lights on the bridge dimmed slightly as power was diverted to the massive weapon system that comprised nearly a third of the Nemesis's internal volume. A low hum built throughout the ship, felt more than heard. "Stellar tap established," Minju continued. "Beginning energy collection from Arcturus." On a secondary display, Zhu watched as invisible tendrils of quantum energy reached out from the Nemesis toward the distant star. The physics involved were beyond the comprehension of most humans, a breakthrough that had come only after a decade of desperate wartime research. "Captain," called Communications Officer Minji from her station. "The ARVEX command ship is hailing us." Zhu raised an eyebrow. In 15 years of war, the ARVEX had rarely communicated directly with human forces. Put it through. The tactical display on the main view screen was replaced by the image of an ARVEX High Commander. Like all of its species, it had a chitinous exoskeleton with multiple limbs and compound eyes that glittered with an unsettling intelligence. This one wore decorative armor plates inscribed with symbols of rank. "I am High Commander Krenter of the ARVEX Collective," the alien announced, its words translated by the ship's computer. The voice was flat and emotionless. "Your resistance is unexpected but futile. The Collective has decreed your species' extinction. Your technology is impressive but will soon be assimilated. Surrender now, and we will allow a quick death rather than the slow harvesting we have planned for your colonies." The bridge crew exchanged glances. The threat was delivered with such cold certainty that it sent chills through even these battle-hardened officers. Zhu stepped forward, making sure she was clearly visible in the return transmission. "This is Captain Zhu Park of the United Earth Defense Force. I command the HS Nemesis." She paused, letting her next words carry the weight of humanity's determination. "The days of humanity retreating are over, Krenter. We're not here to surrender. We're here to win." The Arvex commander's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation that human xenobiologists had identified years ago. "Your defiance is illogical. We have studied your species for 15 years. We know all your capabilities." "Not all of them," Ju replied. She gestured for Minji to cut the transmission. The view screen returned to the tactical display, showing the Arvex flagship now moving to a defensive position, surrounded by its remaining escort vessels. The bombardment platforms were being brought inside its massive hull through opening bay doors. "They're preparing to jump to hyperspace," Taeyong warned. "Energy readings suggest they're charging their drive." "They're running," Do-Yun said with disbelief. "No," Ju corrected him. "They're regrouping. They'll return with a fleet specifically designed to counter our capabilities." She turned to engineering. Status of the Prometheus array. "Energy collection at 92% and rising," Minju reported. "The stellar tap is functioning at optimal efficiency. Time until the Arvex flagship can jump." Taeyong consulted his readings, approximately 40 seconds. Ju nodded. "That's enough time." She returned to her command chair. "Continue charging the array. Lock targeting systems on the Arvex flagship." The seconds ticked by as the Prometheus array drew more energy from Arcturus. The hum throughout the ship intensified, and subtle vibrations could be felt through the deck plating. "Prometheus array at full charge, Captain," reported Taeyong, his voice tense with anticipation. On the view screen, the Arvex flagship was now surrounded by a visible energy field as its hyperdrive spooled up. Jumu leaned forward in her chair. This was the moment that would determine whether humanity had a fighting chance in this war, whether the sacrifices of the past 15 years, the billions of lives lost, the dozens of worlds abandoned, had been worth it. "Target their command ship," she ordered, her voice quiet but firm. "And fire." There was a momentary stillness throughout the ship, as if the Nemesis itself was holding its breath. Then the accumulated energy of a sun was channeled through the most advanced weapon system humanity had ever built. From the bow of the Nemesis, a beam of pure white energy erupted, so bright that the view screen had to dim automatically to prevent blinding the crew. The beam crossed the 2,000 kilometers to the Arvex flagship in an instant, striking at the exact center of the massive vessel. For a split second, nothing seemed to happen. Then the Arvex shields flared brilliantly before collapsing completely. The beam continued through, striking the flagship's hull directly. The result was beyond anything the simulations had predicted. The energy didn't just penetrate the ship, it seemed to consume it from the inside out. Cracks of blinding light spread across the hexagonal disk, emanating from the point of impact. Secondary explosions rippled across its surface as weapons and power systems overloaded. With a final, catastrophic burst of energy, the pride of the Arvex fleet split apart, its fragments scattering across space. The surrounding escort vessels were caught in the destruction, many of them severely damaged by the shockwave. Silence fell over the bridge of the Nemesis as the crew stared at the destruction they had wrought. "Target destroyed," Taeyong finally reported, his voice barely above a whisper. Ju slowly sat back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "Status of remaining Arvex forces." They're breaking formation, Captain," Do-Yun reported, studying the tactical display with amazement. "No coordinated movement. It appears the destruction of the flagship has disrupted their hive mind connection." For the first time in 15 years, Ju said quietly, "We have them on the run." The destruction of the Arvex flagship hung in space like a frozen firework. Debris scattered in all directions, glittering in the light of Arcturus. On the bridge of the Nemesis, the crew watched in stunned silence as their most feared enemy disintegrated before their eyes. Captain Ju gripped the arms of her command chair, her face illuminated by the fading glow of the explosion. For 15 years, Humanity had dreamed of this moment, striking a decisive blow against the seemingly unstoppable Arvex collective. "Damage report," she ordered, her voice cutting through the silence. Commander Doyun checked his console. "Minimal damage to our outer hull plating. Shields recharging at normal rate. The Prometheus array is cycling down safely." And the Arvex fleet. Lieutenant Commander Taedong studied his tactical display. "Complete disarray, Captain. They're breaking formation. No coordinated movements or attacks." He looked up, his eyes wide with realization. The flagship must have been coordinating the hive mind. Without it, they can't function as a collective. Juwu finished. "Sunwoo, bring us around to face the remaining dreadnoughts. Let's press our advantage." The Nemesis turned gracefully, its engines pushing it toward the scattered Arvex forces. 3 dreadnoughts remained, along with numerous smaller vessels, but they were moving erratically, some even colliding with each other in their confusion. "Target the nearest dreadnought," Juwu ordered. "Standard weapons only. Let's conserve the Prometheus array's power." The Nemesis's phase cannons lashed out, striking the dreadnought's shields. Without the coordinated defense algorithms from the flagship, the shields collapsed almost immediately. A barrage of quantum torpedoes followed, tearing through the massive vessel's hull. "Direct hit," reported Taedong. "The dreadnought is venting atmosphere. Its power core is destabilizing." The bridge crew watched as the enormous ship broke apart, secondary explosions cascading through its structure. The remaining 2 dreadnoughts were already turning away, attempting to flee. "The Arvex are retreating," Doyun announced, his voice filled with wonder. "All remaining vessels are powering up their hyperdrives." Juwu allowed herself a small smile. "Let them go. They'll spread the word that humanity is no longer easy prey." A cheer went up from the bridge crew, the first moment of true victory in 15 years of brutal war. Juwu let it continue for a moment before raising her hand for silence. "Our mission isn't complete," she reminded them. "New Terra is still under attack. Hana, contact the ground forces. Let them know help has arrived." "Yes, Captain." As the Nemesis moved to secure orbital control around New Terra, Science Officer Yunji suddenly straightened at her station. "Captain," she called out, her voice urgent. "I'm detecting unusual energy readings from the debris field where the flagship was destroyed." Juwu turned to face her. "What kind of readings?" "Nothing I've ever seen before," Yunji replied, her fingers dancing across her console. "It's not consistent with any known Arvex technology. The energy signature is alien, even by Arvex standards." "On screen," Juwu ordered. The main view screen shifted to show the scattered debris of the Arvex flagship. Among the twisted metal and broken hull plates, a bright point of light pulsed rhythmically. "Magnify," Juwu said. The image zoomed in, revealing what appeared to be a small, perfectly spherical object about 2 meters in diameter. It glowed with a soft blue light that pulsed in a regular pattern. "Analysis?" Juwu asked. Yunji shook her head, her expression puzzled. "It appears to be some kind of data storage device, but the materials are unlike anything in our database. It survived the destruction of the flagship completely intact, which should be impossible given the energies involved." As they watched, the sphere's pulsing suddenly increased in frequency. A moment later, a blinding flash of light erupted from it, forcing the view screen to automatically dim to protect the crew's vision. When the light faded, the sphere remained, now glowing with a steady white illumination. "What just happened?" Juwu demanded. "It appears to have activated," Yunji reported, studying her readings. "And, Captain, it's broadcasting a signal. To the remaining Arvex ships." "No." Yunji looked up, her face pale. "The signal is directed outward, beyond our galaxy. It's using some form of quantum entanglement communication that shouldn't be possible with our current understanding of physics." A cold feeling settled in Juwu's stomach. 15 years fighting the Arvex, and they had never seen technology like this. "Can we block the signal?" Yunji shook her head. "No, Captain. Quantum entanglement is instantaneous. The message, whatever it is, has already been sent. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. After a moment, Jiwoo made her decision. Minju, prepare a retrieval drone. I want that sphere brought aboard. Commander Do-Yun stepped closer to her chair. Captain, with all due respect, bringing unknown alien technology aboard might be risky. Jiwoo finished for him. Yes, but if that thing is as important as it seems, we need to know what it is and what message it just sent. Do-Yun nodded, though his expression remained concerned. Prepare Containment Bay 3, Jiwoo continued. Full isolation protocols. I want a level 10 force field around that thing at all times. Yes, Captain, Minju acknowledged. 30 minutes later, Jiwoo stood in the observation room overlooking Containment Bay 3. Behind a shimmering force field, the mysterious sphere rested on a scanning platform. Its white glow cast eerie shadows around the otherwise darkened room. Science Officer Yunji and a team of specialists worked at various stations, running every scan and analysis possible without physically touching the sphere. What have we learned? Jiwoo asked. Yunji looked up from her work. It's definitely a data storage device, but its capacity is, well, it's beyond anything we've ever developed. Based on our preliminary scans, it could contain the entire sum of human knowledge 1,000 times over. Can we access the data? We're trying, but the encryption is incredibly complex. We might need the ship's aid to help us break through. Jiwoo nodded. Do it. I want to know what's inside that thing. For the next several hours, the Nemesis secured the Arcturus system. The remaining Arvex ground forces on New Terra, cut off from their fleet and the guidance of their hive mind, were quickly overwhelmed by human defenders bolstered by troops from the Nemesis. Reports of similar Arvex retreats came in from other fronts across human space. It should have been a moment of triumph, but Jiwoo couldn't shake her unease about the mysterious sphere. She was in her ready room, reviewing casualty reports from New Terra, when her comm system chimed. Captain, Yunji's voice came through, sounding strained. We've managed to access the sphere's data. I think you need to see this immediately. On my way, Jiwoo replied, already rising from her desk. When she entered the science lab, she found Yunji and her team staring at their screens with expressions ranging from disbelief to horror. Report, Jiwoo ordered. Yunji turned to face her. Captain, the sphere contains historical records, star charts, and what appears to be a warning. The ship's AI is still translating much of it, but we've got the basics. She gestured to a large screen where strange symbols scrolled past, gradually being replaced by human text. The Arvex aren't what we thought they were, Yunji continued. They're refugees. Refugees, Jiwoo repeated incredulously. They've been systematically exterminating us for 15 years. Yes, but according to this data, they're running from something far worse. Yunji pointed to a section of translated text. They call them the Harvesters, an ancient species from beyond our galaxy that moves from one galaxy to another, consuming all organic life before moving on. Jiwoo stared at the screen, trying to process this information. And the Arvex are running from these harvesters. Have been for nearly 1,000 years, Yunji confirmed. They've been trying to establish a defensive perimeter in our galaxy, using captured worlds and resources to build up their forces. They see humanity as competition for the limited resources they need to prepare for the harvesters' arrival. And that signal the sphere sent. Yunji's expression grew even more grave. That's the worst part, Captain. The sphere was a fail-safe. If the Arvex flagship was destroyed, it was programmed to activate and send a distress signal to their home fleet. So more Arvex will be coming, Jiwoo concluded. No. Yunji shook her head slowly. The signal wasn't meant for the Arvex. Based on what we've translated, the sphere was much older than the flagship itself. It appears to be an artifact the Arvex found and were studying. When it activated, she pulled up an image on the screen. a star map showing the Milky Way galaxy and a path leading to it from another galaxy entirely. It sent a beacon to the harvesters. Yunji finished quietly. According to the Arvex records, they're now heading straight for us. Juwu stared at the screen, her blood running cold as the full implications became clear. The destruction of the Arvex flagship hadn't just been a victory for humanity. It had inadvertently triggered a signal to something far worse. "How long?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The data indicates they'll reach our galaxy within 6 months," Yunji replied. "And when they arrive?" She didn't need to finish. The images on the screen showed planet after planet being systematically stripped of all life, entire civilizations wiped out in days. Juwu looked at the sphere, still glowing serenely in its containment field. What had seemed like humanity's greatest triumph now revealed itself as potentially their greatest mistake. "We need to contact Earth immediately," she said, "and find what's left of the Arvex leadership, if these harvesters are real." "Captain," Yunji prompted when Juwu didn't continue. "If they're real," Juwu said grimly, "then we just jumped from one war straight into another. And this time, we may need our old enemies as allies." For 3 days, the Nemesis remained in orbit around New Terra, its presence a symbol of humanity's first real victory in 15 years of war. The crew worked tirelessly, helping to coordinate relief efforts for the colony below, while maintaining vigilance against any potential Arvex counterattack. But Captain Juwu's mind was elsewhere, consumed by the terrible knowledge contained within the alien sphere. On the 4th day, she stood in the ship's communications center as technicians established a secure quantum link with Earth. The room was cleared of all but essential personnel as the most secure connection protocol was initiated. "Link established, Captain," reported Communications Officer Minji. "Earth Defense Command is standing by." Juwu nodded. "Put them through." The large view screen at the front of the room flickered to life, revealing a conference table surrounded by Earth's highest military and political leaders. At the center sat President Hyunsu, his usually confident expression now tight with concern. Beside him was Admiral Jinwoo, the architect of humanity's defensive strategy for the past decade. "Captain Park," the president began formally, "we've received your preliminary report about the Arvex data core. Is this information verified?" "As much as possible, Mr. President," Juwu replied. "Our linguists and xenobiologists have been working around the clock to translate and interpret the data. The ship's AI gives it a 97% confidence rating." She gestured to Science Officer Yunji, who stepped forward with a data tablet. "With your permission, sir, Officer Yunji will present our findings." The president nodded, and Yunji began a detailed briefing, displaying translated documents, star charts, and historical records from the alien sphere. The faces of Earth's leadership grew increasingly grim as the full picture emerged. The Arvex have been fleeing from an entity they call the Harvesters for centuries, Juwu explained when Yunji finished. "Their war with us was not about conquest as we believed, but an attempt to secure resources and territory to continue their escape. They saw our rapid expansion as a threat to their survival plan. So they decided to wipe us out rather than explain or seek alliance." Admiral Jinwoo noted, his voice hard with 15 years of bitterness. "Yes, Admiral," Juwu acknowledged. "Their records indicate they considered diplomacy, but concluded that humanity was too unpredictable and individualistic to be reliable allies. Their hive mind consciousness makes them fundamentally different from us in how they approach cooperation." President Hyunsu leaned forward. "And now these harvesters know we're here, because of the signal sent when we destroyed their command ship." Juwu nodded solemnly. The sphere was an ancient artifact the Arvex discovered centuries ago. They believed it was created by a civilization that fell to the harvesters. When the flagship was destroyed, it activated automatically and sent a quantum signal that, according to Arvex calculations, will reach the harvesters in days. "And how long until these harvesters arrive?" asked Defense Minister Subin, her face ashen. The Arvex believe they will reach our galaxy within 6 months, Ju replied. Their records show a consistent pattern. The harvesters send advanced scouts first, then massive harvesting ships. They consume all organic life in their path, strip planets of resources, and move on to the next galaxy. A heavy silence fell over both rooms as the implications sank in. This wasn't just a threat to humanity, or even to the Arvex. This was extinction on a galactic scale. How do the Arvex know so much about these harvesters? Admiral Jinwoo finally asked. They encountered them 800 years ago, Yunji explained. The harvesters consumed nearly 60% of Arvex territory before they managed to slow their advance with sacrificial tactics. The Arvex abandoned their home systems and have been in constant retreat ever since, moving from galaxy to galaxy. President Hyunsu's expression was grave. And what do we know of their capabilities? Their weaknesses? Very little, sir, Ju admitted. The Arvex records focus more on escape strategies than combat, but they do indicate that the Harvester's technology is far beyond even what the Arvex possess. The conference room on Earth erupted into multiple conversations as military officers and government officials began debating response strategies. President Hyunsu raised his hand for silence. Captain Park, he said when quiet returned. What do you recommend? Ju took a deep breath. This was the moment that would define humanity's future, perhaps the future of all life in the galaxy. Mr. President, 12 hours ago, we detected 3 Arvex vessels approaching New Terra under a flag of truce. They're maintaining distance and have powered down their weapons. I believe they wish to communicate. She gestured to the tactical display, where the alien ships hung in formation, well outside weapons range of the Nemesis. With your permission, I'd like to begin diplomatic discussions with the Arvex leadership. If humanity and the collective combine their technologies and strategies, we might stand a chance against the Harvesters. Diplomacy. With the beings who have slaughtered billions of our people, General Minho objected forcefully. The enemy of my enemy, murmured President Hyunsu, his eyes never leaving Juwoo's face. Exactly, sir, she confirmed. The Arvex have been fighting the Harvesters for centuries. They have knowledge we lack, and the Nemesis proved that our technology has now surpassed theirs in some areas. Perhaps together we can do what neither of us could do alone. Admiral Jinwoo, who had lost his entire family when the Arvex destroyed the Europa colony, spoke up unexpectedly. The Nemesis is proof that we've developed technology the Arvex never anticipated. Perhaps we can do what they couldn't, stand and fight these Harvesters rather than run forever. President Hyunsu turned to confer quietly with his advisors. After several minutes of intense discussion, he faced the screen again. Captain Park, you have full authority to negotiate an alliance with the Arvex. Make it clear that any agreement must include full disclosure of all their knowledge about the Harvesters and their technology. And he hesitated. Make it equally clear that this does not erase the blood debt between our species. Justice for our dead will be addressed when and if we survive this new threat. Understood, Mr. President, Juwoo replied, feeling the weight of billions of lives, human and Arvex, settling on her shoulders. One more thing, Captain, the President added. The public doesn't know about this yet. We'll need to prepare humanity for not just the news of the Harvesters, but also for the concept of allying with the Arvex. It will not be easy. Yes, sir. I recommend we begin with New Terra. The colonists here have seen both the destruction the Arvex can cause and the victory the Nemesis achieved. They might be the bridge we need. The President nodded. We'll follow your lead on this, Captain. Earth Defense Command out. As the transmission ended, Juwoo remained standing before the blank screen, lost in thought. Commander Do-yeon approached quietly. Orders, Captain. Juwoo turned to face her XO. Prepare a communication to the Arvex vessels. Inform them that I am willing to meet with their representative aboard the Nemesis. Standard diplomatic protocols, but maximum security measures. Yes, Captain. Do-yeon hesitated. Permission to speak freely. Always. Do you believe we can trust them? After everything they've done? Jiwoo considered the question carefully. Trust? No, not yet. But necessity makes strange allies, Commander. 15 years ago, we thought the Arvex were the greatest threat humanity would ever face. We were wrong. She moved to the viewport, gazing out at the stars. Stars that would soon face a threat unlike anything this galaxy had ever known. The Nemesis was built to end one war, she said quietly. Now it will be the flagship of an alliance that might save all sentient life in the galaxy. Do-hyun followed her gaze. And if we fail? Then we will have tried together, which is more than either of our species has done before. She turned from the viewport with renewed determination. Send the message to the Arvex, and have the conference room prepared. History begins today, Commander. As the orders were carried out, Jiwoo returned to her quarters to prepare for the most important diplomatic meeting in human history. On her desk lay a small hologram, a picture of her family back on Earth. Next to it, she placed a fragment from the Arvex sphere, its alien symbols a constant reminder of what was coming. In 6 months, the harvesters would arrive. Until then, former enemies would need to become allies, centuries of hatred would need to be set aside, and the galaxy's diverse species would need to stand united for the first time. The war with the Arvex was over. The true war, the war for survival itself, was just beginning.